Let's go ahead and transition to the latest with regard to the beautiful bill. A lot going on here. So Steve Bannon making some interesting comments about the nature of what you would actually need to do if you cared about deficit reduction. And he has been saying for a while now, you really need to lift taxes on the rich. Let's take a listen to that.
Want to stop the dead bomb, Elon and the guys on Capitol Hill? You're going to have to raise taxes. The wealthy can't get an extension of the tax cut. That's got to go to the middle class and the working class. That has to be extended and it has to be made permanent. At 40%, the top bracket of 40%, you pick them. That's got to go to 39, go back to 30, snap back to 39.5% and go to 40%. The math simply doesn't work. There are no Doge cuts. Let me repeat this. And this is not USAID. Those are programmatic things. I'm talking about waste fraud. Where's the fraud in Medicaid? Which is where is it? They haven't showed up with any. Has anybody been turned over to DOJ for fraud? The problem with Musk, and I said this from the beginning, he gave false hope to this political class who doesn't want to cut anything. The reason, if the big beautiful bill's got all these problems and it has some issues, he drove it because he promised $1 trillion, ladies and gentlemen, $1 trillion that got him off the hook. It's time for everybody to grow up. Run around, show me where it is. The rescission next week is $9 billion, and $2 billion, folks, is PBS and NPR. Give me a break. Didn't need Doge for that. Been fighting for that one forever. There's $7 billion in there supposedly of, fraud. On a $7 trillion, he committed to the President of the United States $1 trillion.
So, Ryan, his position is basically like, the reason the big, beautiful bill blows up the deficit is because of Elon, because they actually took seriously, Trump included apparently, this idea he was going to cut a $2 trillion or $1 trillion, which I just can't believe that I just can't accept that they are really that dumb. Like, do you accept that? Like, if you just look at the government spend and where it is and what you would need to do, they really thought he was going to cut $1 trillion?
I have, as you know, covered Congress for a very long time.
Yeah, tell me.
I believe
you think they're really they were really that dumb.
We are not sending our best.
I mean, and he's trying to. So part of it, obviously, I agree that they should lift the taxes on the rich. And also, by the way, when they say lift taxes, they just mean don't cut taxes as much as is planned to in this bill. But in any case,
it is. I'll say this. Every time I speak with a member of Congress whose lights are on, it is a revelation to me. It's like, oh, awesome. I found one.
You have a working brain.
Republican, Democrat, this is somebody who has an idea of what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And that is very unusual. That is not the normal member of Congress.
And so he's saying effectively that Trump, too, bought this idea that there would be $1 trillion in cuts made by Doge, and then they could just go wild in this bill and spend whatever they want, most of which is, gigantic tax cut for people who really don't need that tax cut, and that it would be A-OK.
And
that they were
caught
unawares again that, this wasn't going to happen. But I mean, also, this also doesn't really hold up to any level of scrutiny either, because by the time this bill is being crafted, it is already abundantly clear that Doge is utter and complete failure. And he points to the thing that you've been pointing to of basically okay, if there was fraud, where are the indictments?
Right.
Give me one instance of a single one. Not things you didn't like, not things that were DEI, not departments like USAID that you just don't, think should exist. Actual fraud, of which I am quite sure exists within the federal government budget. Not a single instance, not one.
Right. They would be frog marched in front of the
We would all know every detail.
We'd know their name. We'd know their middle name. It'd be one of those people.
Yes.
Where they like a presidential assassin. And so Elon Musk going all in. It reminded me in the book where there's an anecdote, this Elon biography. I'm sure you remember this, where he plays poker, and he has no idea how to play poker, but he wins his first night. He wins a decent amount of money, and somebody's like, how did you do that? You don't even know how to play poker. He's like, I just kept going all in constantly, and then when I would lose, I would just buy back in and go all in again. And if you do that and you have unlimited funds and you outlast everyone at the table, you will eventually take all their money. Like he's right about that. And I feel like that's been his approach to politics. He clearly doesn't know how politics works, but he just keeps going all in. And he went all in, taking on Boeing and the rest of the kind of rocket companies.
Yeah.
And it worked. Huge credit to him. Like taking on those incumbent industries and staking a position and then becoming kind of a dominant player. Incredible. And huge risk, went all in. Then he went all in with Trump, putting so much on the line because if he lost, Democrats were like coming for him on a lot of different levels.
Yeah.
Went all in. But then he loses because he went all in on Doge. So he's like, oh, and he had no cards. So he loses the whole pile. Now, put up this next element. He's going all in against Trump. He says, in November next year, we fire all politicians who betrayed the American people. And he's talking about voting for this bill.
What is
it was a party line vote in the House.
I was going to say all but 5 Republicans voted for the bill.
Yes.
So be my guest, brother.
Yeah, so now he's saying he's going after all politicians. Now, will he do it? I don't know, but saying it is pushing all your chips in.
Yeah, and I mean, from my reading of him and his history, biographies, whatever, this is just how he operates. He's one of these, I'm sure you guys probably know people like this, who don't feel like they're living unless it's all on the line.
Yes.
And he's one of these people.
Yeah.
Like, if he's not risking everything, complete collapse, humiliation, bankruptcy, then he doesn't feel like he's really alive. And so I've been saying for a few weeks now, I could totally see him doing another face turn. Because remember, Elon and Obama had a great relationship. Obama basically saved both SpaceX and Tesla during his administration. Elon was, much more on the sort of like Democratic liberal side of the equation, which just shows you these guys, like, even in his complaints about this bill, it's all about his own interests. He doesn't like that the EV credits were stripped down. I don't like that the EV credits were stripped down either, but he's mad about that. He's mad about the fact that Trump pulled his NASA pick, which obviously very important to him with regard to SpaceX. But I could totally see him trying to do a face turn and, go back to the other side of the political party. And there would be plenty of people in the Democratic side who would be happy to welcome him back in, at least at the elite level. I think at the grassroots level, once you've done your Roman salute and all the things that he's done and all the things that he's said and the way that he has just completely made himself the most toxic figure on the planet to your average normie Democratic voter, I think that is going to be very hard to forgive and forget among the base.
And I think he's also genuinely very concerned about the deficit impact of the bill, and the debt impact, because if the United States enters a period of high interest rate service on our debt, that means that both private companies and the federal government are going to have less money to spend on his Mars mission.
Yeah.
So this is in direct competition with his life's mission.
And I do think my reading of Elon is that is the life mission, the making humans interplanetary and like going to Mars, as like ridiculous and absurd as it seems. I do think that is his life mission, and that's why he jumped into government, because he realized it's not something you can do as a private company on your own. You basically need that mission to be backstopped by the Treasury of the United States of America. But we have to be like a functioning, wealthy nation with the ability to borrow and spend on something like a, fantasy mission to Mars. And so I think you're right about that aspect.
I think if he spent, curious for your take on this, imagine this. Let's say he spends $4 million against Mike Lawler, Republican in upstate New York, who is one of the key targets. And he spends $4 million on handful
Mike Lawler's going to lose anyway, isn't he?
I don't know. It's going to be very close. He could hold on.
Okay.
And we'll see what the world looks like in a year.
Yeah.
But let's say he spends $4 million on 20 different races, $80 million bucks, and helps Democrats win back the House. I think most activist Democrats are instrumental enough. They'd be like, welcome back. But I mean, the level of destruction he did, and gleeful destruction with the chainsaw on the stage, demonstrating such cruelty.
Yeah.
The Roman salute, elevating all of these freaks on Twitter.
Yeah.
I don't know. Those are in competition. Where do you think they land?
I think it depends very much on the kind of intra-party fight in 2028. Whether you have, because right now there is so much energy among the base and among the American people more broadly for like fighting oligarchy, and he is the symbol of that. And so,
yes.
He made himself the symbol. He's the richest man on the planet, and he has spent his time in government destroying Social Security, killing kids in Africa. I mean, it really is grotesque. Not to mention the like carnival level imagery of him on the stage with the chainsaw and the glee that he took in destroying people's lives. So while I think the elite leaders of the Democratic Party would be happy to welcome him back in and happy to take his money, I think that the Democratic Party base is headed in a more radical anti-billionaire direction, and that is not going to be something that he would be able to coexist with.
Let's hope. It would be very funny to go. I mean, it's already funny that he's going from, we must elect all these guys to save Western civilization.
Right.
2 years later, we must throw them all out of office.
Right, to save
Western civilization was overrated. Anyway,
yes.
So Trump is, unsurprisingly, a little bit annoyed by this. Let's roll B3 because it's kind of funny.
I think the Elon Musk thing really caught the president by surprise. And I hear he is furious, but I think he's so smart to keep his powder dry because he just plays into what critics would have to say. The right can't get out of their own way. Instead, just you have a goal, pass it. Elon Musk is not in the Senate or the House. Don't worry about it.
Can I offer a different perspective, Ainsley? As someone who is supportive of the president's agenda, I am upset with Congress right now. I don't blame the president for the big, beautiful bill. I blame Congress because they go to their constituents every single election and they say they're going to cut spending, cut. And it doesn't seem like there's a willingness to do that. But I don't think Elon is anti-MAGA now or anti the president now. He worked so hard, put a lot of stuff on the line to get a lot of wasteful stuff cut, and it doesn't seem like Congress is showing that same willingness.
I thought Elon was very respectful in some of the original interviews, just saying, look, we have differences. I don't agree with him on everything. But this latest comment about calling the big, beautiful bill a disgusting abomination, I was shocked to hear him say that. I can understand why the president would not be happy about that. This is someone who worked on his team.
I want to die and come back as Donald Trump. This guy, if he comes out hard against Elon Musk, the base loves that he did that. If he's mad at Elon Musk but is too afraid to say a word, he's savvy and sophisticated.
That's right. Art of the deal.
If he writes a good, big, beautiful bill, then he's a genius for writing a great piece of legislation. If he writes a bad, big, beautiful bill, then it's not his fault. It's actually the people in the House.
He was betrayed.
He's betrayed. There is nothing that he could do that would warrant even a second of criticism on that network. It's truly just absolutely phenomenal.
I mean, that was Steve Bannon too, of like, well, it's not Trump's fault.
Bannon still has not come out and said, vote this bill down, which he, despite the fact that Bannon
which is
has
important
been
to note.
Enormously critical of it, and I love hearing him rip it apart, but he has so far stopped short of the logical conclusion, which is, then don't do it.
Bannon is a politician. He realizes that he needs his, best chance of getting whatever things he wants and having access to power is by being on Trump's good side. He knows what that means. That's why
he's so good at never criticizing
It's
Trump.
Always somebody else's fault.
Yeah.
It's Elon promised these things and didn't deliver, and it's his fault, and you relied on his, ability to find these cuts, and he didn't do it. So it's ultimately his fault, and you see the same kind of game going on there with the Fox and Friends people who are trying to make sense of this new world where Elon and Trump are at odds with one another.
He did criticize Trump on the H-1B. Bannon did criticize Trump on the H-1B front. And every
Directly?
Directly, and every time he would say, we love you, you're the greatest. We've disagreed with you on this for a long time. And I remember there was this Bannon interview that Bannon did when he was just a radio host in 2015 with Trump, and they were arguing about H-1Bs.
Well, it looks like Bannon ultimately won that fight because at the time, Trump rhetorically backed the, yes, we support H-1B side of things. But in practice, in terms of the policy, it's been Stephen Miller's policy agenda.
Yeah,
and
totally.
Obviously, they're going aggressively after foreign students and visa holders. So, ultimately,
so he was savvy enough to know he could criticize Trump, not personally, just like on the policy.
Yeah.
And that he would probably win because he had Stephen Miller, who Trump told, I think it was MBZ in UAE. He told some Emirates, some leader, and he's like, "This is the guy who runs my administration." That's how he introduced Stephen Miller.
That's right. I think there's a lot to that.
Yeah, we'll take the
look
man
the
at his
signal
word.
chats, yeah, and you see who was calling the shots in terms of speaking for the boss. There's some weirdness around the deficit conversation that's going on the Republican side, because you have people like Rand Paul, Ron Johnson, who are upset about the amount that the bill blows up the deficit. But the reason the bill blows up the deficit is because of these gigantic tax cuts for the rich that they ideologically support. And so and we can put the numbers up on the screen here. This is a chart that they assembled. Steve Ratner actually assembled, but I think it's useful to look at, that shows how much this does blow up the deficit compared to other large packages in recent years. I mean, the bipartisan infrastructure bill is nowhere close. But even if you look at the American Rescue Plan, which was the first COVID package, which was the second one, the CARES Act, which was the first one, the original Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was the original giant giveaway to the rich, this blows these out of the water. But they can't really say that because they're supposed to be really ideologically committed to the tax cuts, and also because they're supposed to be really ideologically opposed to the CBO and scoring the tax cuts in like anything approaching a reasonable way, and not just pretending like tax cuts are fairy dust and they make they make deficits magically go away. So instead, they've been honing in on, well, it increases the debt ceiling, and that's what we really are opposed to. So what do you make of some of those dynamics there?
Yeah, it's cowardly, because the debt ceiling is not a real thing. It's a manufactured product of an very old way of thinking about financing the government, and it's ridiculous. And I've said I got to be consistent here. It's a ridiculous thing.
Yes, it should go away.
The Congress appropriates money and authorizes the Fed or the government to borrow certain amounts of money, to pay for particular programs, and to do particular spending. Like, they do that. And then we throw in this extra step where you have to then also authorize the limit on which the debt can be generated.
Right.
It's like,
and no other country does this.
Right, you already did all those things. Like, you passed all those things. Like, get rid of this thing. And so, but it lands for voters, because it's one thing and it's one number. Like, you want to borrow $5 trillion? That's crazy. That's an insane number. And so for a politician, it's easier for them, I think, to just latch onto that. Did we just have the Russ vote? Yeah,
put B6 up on the screen. No, we haven't talked about this yet. We've got a Russ vote tweet here, his spin.
OMB director, this is the brains of this operation. Like, this is the real revolutionary. This
is the Project 2025 guy.
Yeah.
He's the one, what did he say? He thinks federal government workers need to be put through trauma or something like that?
Yes, like this guy is hardcore. He and Stephen Miller together, being basically the two most powerful people in this government, is just a startling turn of events over the last 100 years. Like, these are absolutely revolutionary gentlemen. So he writes here, OMB just reviewed the new CBO score of the One Big Beautiful Bill. It confirms what we knew about the bill at House passage. The bill reduces deficits by $1.4 trillion over 10 years when you adjust for CBO's one big gimmick, not using a realistic current policy baseline. It includes $1.7 trillion in mandatory savings, the most in history. If you care about deficits and debt, this bill dramatically improves the fiscal picture. And so he does two things here. One is he says it's not fair to use the CBO's approach. These tax cuts were never going to expire, so we should not assume they were going to expire and then count that against us. Except the problem is Wall Street and the bond markets, they think about it much more closely to the CBO. Like that. The CBO and the bond markets agree, therefore, the bond market has a say in this. And that's where the movements in interest rates are going to come from. The second thing he does is he bullies OMB into giving him the numbers that he wants. Like, he runs the OMB. And he's going to start with a conclusion and demand that they generate it. And this I know from sources inside OMB, and there's been plenty of reporting about this. And so what he told them basically is, you need to conclude that cutting all of these taxes is going to produce X amount of economic growth, which will then lead to more tax revenue, which will then cut the deficit.
Right.
Maybe it will. But there's no reason to think over all of the years that this has been tried that is what will actually happen in practice.
No, of course not, because they'll just rich people will not. You said this well. It certainly will not increase the real economy. There'll be more share buybacks and things of that nature, more financial engineering, more wealth inequality. There'll be all of that, for sure. But yeah, I mean, and the other thing is here in terms of the gimmick, what he's saying with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and what he's talking about with the policy baseline is when they passed that bill, part of what they did to monkey around with the numbers and make sure that it didn't say an even more gigantic number that was being added to the debt and the deficit was that they had a technical sunsetting of these rates. And now you say, oh, we never intended those rates to go away. So you shouldn't count it in. So they didn't want to count it in the first time. And now they don't want to count it in now either. That's the fuzzy math that they're engaged in here, Ryan.
Right. And so Russ Vought testified yesterday in Congress about the dire consequences of not passing the big, beautiful bill. Let's roll this.
If HR1 fails, if whatever comes back from the Senate fails to get to the desk of the president and signed into law, what happens at the end of this year?
I think we'll have a recession. I think we will be, economic storm clouds will be very dark. I think we'll have a 60% tax increase on the American people. And just if I could answer Congressman Hoyer's question or statement, the notion that this bill, I mean, we've been actually criticized unfairly for on the reconciliation bill for the fact that it is all mandatory savers. I mean, you said, look, we need to address the mandatory side of the House. There's $1.7 trillion in mandatory savers on the reconciliation bill. Do we need to do things on the appropriation side, the discretionary side? Yes, that's what we're here to talk about with rescissions and the bill that the budget that we've sent up to you. But we have to get back to what we did in 1997, where we had for the first time substantial mandatory reforms around not just cutting people and just getting people off programs, but reforms, a work requirement. We're using the same model that Bill Clinton signed into law, and we think it will have incredible impact on not just these programs, but giving people dignity of work. And we're not going to be ashamed by that.
Mandatory means, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, those types of projects. When Bill Clinton and the Republican House and Senate did this last time, the way that they saved money was by kicking people off programs. And so he's saying right there, we should do it like Bill Clinton did. And Bill Clinton also did work requirements in order to kick people off the programs.
CBO says that if this bill goes into law, 10 million fewer Americans will have health insurance coverage, mostly from getting kicked off of Medicaid, but there are also some changes to the Affordable Care Act and Medicare that will lead to losses in coverage. So you're talking about 10 million more Americans losing their health insurance coverage in order to fund giant tax cut for the rich, not to mention cuts to SNAP and food stamps as well.
And unfortunately for all of us, those people don't stop getting sick, having heart attacks, having diabetes, having health complications that need to be treated. So you don't actually save money out of the entire economy. You're just moving it around. And it's cheaper to give people Medicaid as a society than it is to treat them
that's
in the emergency
why
department.
we have the most expensive healthcare regime in the in the developing world, because we have these little piecemeal and you got to pay and millions of people don't get coverage at all. And it ends up being incredibly penny wise and pound foolish, because at the end of the day, what you end up paying for is the most expensive type of care where people don't go to the doctor. They don't take preventative measures because they can't afford to. And then you're at the emergency room, in crisis, which is obviously terrible for human beings and also, terrible for the budget.
And also because the Supreme Court struck down the Medicaid expansion in Obamacare, that left it up to each individual state for whether or not they would expand Medicaid. Most of those red states had to be pushed by the people in the states. So a bunch of red states only expanded Medicaid via constitutional amendment. They would put it on the ballot, the people went out and voted for it. We thought, okay, this is over. Everybody's fought for this, and now the Medicaid expansion is in there. But you get a revolutionary like Vought in there, and he's going to then cut the Medicaid federal match that goes to these red states. But look what happened. They put it in their constitutions. So the red states don't actually have the option of dialing it back. Like, they have to spend this because they agreed to do it in their constitution. So now the red state has to either raise taxes or they have to cut spending somewhere else to meet their constitutional obligations. So who's he screwing here?
Right. A lot of red states,
Yeah.
a lot of MAGA,
Yeah.
Steve Bannon would say.
Yes.
All right, guys, 2 quick things. Number 1, by popular demand, we are bringing back the monthly subscription. Number 2, you can get a month free, Ryan, by putting in that promo code BPFree at breakingpoints.com.
Yeah, and I think the most important reason to become a premium subscriber is just as an act of support for the show. It helps us do what we're doing. But if you're curious what the benefits are of doing it, take the free month, and you'll see
go.
you get the AMAs, you get the second half of the Friday show, you get it, you get the full show emailed to you earlier. It makes your life much better. Do it for a month. At, breakingpoints.com, BPFree is a promo code. And if after a month your life isn't dramatically improved, you can just cancel. If it is, it's just $10 a month.
There you go.